On this edition of Upfront, Inside the Entertainment Industry, Ray Cornelia speaks with legendary playwright, author, and activist Pearl Cleage about her new Alliance Theater production, Something Moving, a meditation on Maynard. Cleage is Alliance Theater's current playwright in residence and has penned such iconic works as Flying West, Blues for an Alabama Sky, and appeared on Oprah's Book Club. Also on today's show, Ray sits down with Susie Bass, award-winning director David Cote, for an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at this highly anticipated show. More with Pearl Cleage and Something Moving after the break.
This is Atlanta, Georgia, the gateway to the South, a city that for years has stood for culture and progress. A few months ago, its citizens elected a man they thought could best do the job as mayor of Atlanta. His name is Maynard Jackson, and he's the city's first black mayor.
I will be governed
by what is my conviction.
by what is my conviction
For the public good.
for the public good.
I further swear
I further swear
that I will uphold and support
that I will uphold and support
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of the state of Georgia.
and of the state of Georgia.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ms. Cleage, take us back to the night that Maynard won. 1973, right?
1973,
Yeah.
October.
Take us back to that.
That was such an incredible night because I had grown up in a very political family. So I had worked in political campaigns my whole life, but I had never worked for a candidate that won. All the candidates I worked for were very radical people. My father ran for office all the time.
I was going to say, he ran for governor.
Very radical, ran for governor, ran for city council, ran for, all kinds of things. But he was such a radical voice in Detroit, which is where I grew up, but never won those offices. So he was a minister primarily and would run for office because he believed that politics was really important, that we had to be involved. But Maynard was the first candidate I had ever worked for who actually won the office we had been working for. So I was ecstatic. It was just a great feeling personally to have worked for this candidate and worked so hard for him in every possible way. And then he won. And we were all trying to maintain our cool and, be all yes, we understand, we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we were just beside ourselves. And it's, I always tell people that everybody could not get into the ballroom where the speeches were being made and all of that. So there was a conga line down Peachtree Street of people who just wanted to celebrate. And there was a lot of drinking going on by that time. But a conga line celebrating Maynard Jackson going down Peachtree Street just seemed like the essence of what had happened, because that moment changed the city forever in the best possible way. It was all kinds of people coming together to say, we think this guy can really move us in the direction we want Atlanta to go, and we did.
And what was it about him that made you believe in him wanting to be mayor and even the dream that he had for the city of Atlanta? Because I think that probably early on he had an idea of where he wanted to take Atlanta if he got into leadership.
He did. He actually was moved by the assassinations that rocked all of us during that time. The Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of those assassinations. And I think Maynard really took all of that in. And when our senator at the time announced that he was going to run, and he was unopposed, and he was not a good guy. He was a segregationist to the bone. And that's how Maynard first got into politics. He ran for the Senate from the state of Georgia, which had never happened, that there would be a black person as a serious candidate. That was in 1968. And of course he did not win, but he carried the city of Atlanta. And people said, well, wait a minute, if he can carry the city of Atlanta, he can be elected in the city of Atlanta. So that his love for the city was so deep and so a part of everything about him. And one of the things I loved about working for him was riding around the city with him, and he would know somebody on every single street. And it wasn't like he would just know somebody in the abstract. He would be like, oh, there's Mr. Johnson, stop the car for a minute. And the driver would stop the car and he'd say, how's your grandmama doing? I know she wasn't feeling so good. So he was completely connected to the people in the city at every level, not just the people in the boardrooms and the bankers and all of that. He was connected to the people in this town, and everybody trusted him. We believed in him because he was telling us the truth. He was not trying to make a story that didn't relate to what we knew to be true. The first time I saw him on television, he was talking about police brutality. The police had shot some young boy who had, the shop owner said that he had shoplifted something. And the police shot him, or the store owner shot him. Somebody shot him right in front of the place. And they removed the body, but the blood was still on the street. And Maynard went and stood on that blood and talked about police brutality and talked about how the police have to be a part of the community and be a part of working with us in the community. And I had never seen a politician do that. I mean, he actually was there where this had happened and was talking about it. And he believed it. He was passionate about it, about making the city government, the police, and everything else about city government work at every level for everybody. And when I saw him there standing on that blood, talking about what he wanted to do as a leader, I said, I'm in. I need to volunteer for this guy. Whenever he runs for office, I'm going to be a part of that. And I was.
Reorganization, what do you think on the list will be most important as far as, say, combating bureaucracy in your own administration?
Well, number one, after that, of course, will be fighting crime in Atlanta and fighting the underlying causes of crime, among which are poverty and drug addiction. We will have a heightened human resources thrust in Atlanta to move on the despair and the disorientation felt by so many of our citizens, both of which I think lead to crime ultimately. We will also make sure that our police department becomes the very best in this country. We need better training of our policemen. We need to have more retraining of policemen on a periodic and systematized basis. We need to reduce the homicide rate here, and there's going to be a need to have some degree of gun control or registration, whatever may be needed there. But lowering the statistics on crime will be certainly the first major job we'll undertake.
And so how did you become his press secretary and director of communication? Because you had this history of what I call artivism, being an artist and an activist. But how did that connection, how did that happen?
I volunteered for him. I was working at the time, I was working at a television station. And I invited him to come and be on the program. And so he accepted. He was in the midst of the campaign, just starting. And he always would introduce himself, like you could mistake him for anybody else. He would always be like, Maynard Jackson, who are you? And I said, oh, I know who you are. And so he did the interview, and I said, I would very much like to volunteer for your campaign. And he said, we would love to have you. We're looking for bright young people like you. What do you do? And I said, well, I'm producing here at this, but I'm really a writer. I would love to write for you. And so he had a speech coming up, and he asked me if I would write a speech for him. And it was a speech for Vietnam veterans. And I had known so many people in my generation who had been destroyed by the war, either killed in it or came back damaged by it, so that I really felt that issue strongly. And he asked if we could write the speech, me and my husband. And we did, and gave him the speech, and then he did the speech, but we weren't at the event where he did it.
Okay.
So we're at home Saturday morning, and a big black car pulls up in front, and out steps Maynard Jackson. And so I'm looking out the window. I said, oh, he must have hated that speech. That must have been really terrible.
He's going to tell you.
And he came to the door and said, that is the best speech anybody ever wrote for me. Thank you. We are looking for young people like you all. I hope that you will be involved with what we do. And we both did. We went to work for that campaign. Both of us went to work in the administration, and because I was a writer, he figured I could work with the press, not understanding that those are two very different things.
Right.
But I stayed there for 2.5 years because I believed in what he was doing, and I wanted to be a part of what I knew was a transforming moment for the city of Atlanta, and he gave me that.
Who was Pearl Cleage at that time? Because you were, I did some research. You transitioned out of Howard. You came here and you attended Spelman. You had graduated by that time.
Yes, graduated from Spelman.
And I believe you were, as you said, you were married, and you had your daughter at that point?
I had, no, I didn't have my daughter yet. I actually had my daughter when I was working at City Hall, which is, one of those things where you say, we can do it all. We women would say that a lot. We can do it all, we can do it all. But the thing is, you kill yourself trying to do it all, trying to work for the first black mayor, write speeches, do all of that, and be pregnant and have a baby. It was a lot. But I was a part of that generation of all of us didn't call ourselves feminists, but that's what we were. We were making new pathways for women. And we were also making, because we were black women, making new pathways for black women. Okay. So that the very challenges that we were facing were things that we were determined to fix. We wanted to be able to do as much as we could. We didn't want to be held back because we were mothers. We also wanted to be workers. We wanted to do what we were doing. But I was a budding feminist, just discovering what that meant in my real life. I was a young mother with a new baby, trying to run home and nurse the baby and go back to my job at City Hall. So there was a lot going on, and I didn't have enough time for my own writing. And I remember I used to write very late at night after I had taken care of everything in my household, done the work for the mayor, and I was up real late trying to write a poem. And I'm trying to write a love poem, and the mayor's voice was in my head. And I said to myself, okay, it's time for me to leave City Hall, because I have other kinds of writing to do. And I love Maynard to death, but I don't want him to be a part of my love poems. Right. That's a different kind of love. Right. But I really felt like those 2.5 years that I spent there, I was able to do what I think a good speechwriter does, which is to listen to the big ideas of the charismatic leader, yeah, and translate those ideas into language that ordinary people can understand. You know, that people riding the bus home from work can understand, that people who just get 2 seconds of it on TV can understand. And I watched my father, as a wonderful speaker, as a minister, I watched my father do that, take very complex ideas and translate them into language that anybody could understand. Mm-hmm. So I admired that skill, and I was good at it, so that I was a really good speechwriter, because I could take a great big idea and make it manageable.
And so was he the type that it's like, Pearl, I need a speech, or you all would talk about some things beforehand, or how did you deliver these speeches?
Well, we talked all the time. Okay. You know, I was working there, so I talked all the time. I shadowed him lots of places where he would go. So I would hear him talking to people, and then he would be thinking about an audience and what he wanted to tell them. So he would say, this is a group of Vietnam veterans, and I want to talk to them about this. I want to talk to them about this. This is a group of bank presidents. I want to talk to them about this. This is a church group. This is whoever it was. He would tell me who it was and kind of what he wanted to say. And then after a while, he got to where he trusted me to know how to say what it was that he was trying to put forward. So we talked a lot, but he also would, you know, send me notes, make sure you put this in, make sure you put this in. And I would do it, because that's like being a playwright, where it's not you speaking, but it's actually you being able to channel other people's voices. As a playwright, I channel the characters that I've created, but for him, I had to channel the voice of a real person and make sure that it sounded like him. Even though he hadn't written every line, it had to be as if he had the time to write every line. That's the line he would have written. That was always my goal.
Wow, amazing. Let's talk about this title, Something Moving. I thought it was very interesting. Where did that come from? What was the inspiration behind that?
It's kind of like that feeling, and I guess this is kind of like a church thing, where it's like something moving, something in the air, the spirit is moving, you know, all of that. Okay. And I felt like there was that feeling in Atlanta at the time that Maynard got elected for the first time, and we all felt it. There was something moving. And he felt it too. There was something moving. So we all knew it, and we all were being moved by that same something. And it was a moment in time where this used to be, Georgia used to be a slave state. They bought and sold people like us in this state every day for years and years and years. So that this was a moment when not only was slavery over, not only did we have a civil rights bill and a civil rights movement, but now we, the people, were getting ready to elect someone who was like us, who was from our community, to represent us and represent everybody else in the city. Because he wasn't a black mayor only representing black people. He was a black man who was elected mayor of Atlanta, and he took that very seriously. He wanted to represent everybody in Atlanta. And that's always a difficult job, because there's different interests that you have to juggle. But he was good at that, and he was open to hearing all the points of view and trying to address all of the problems that people would have. But you know, when you're talking to someone who lives in the projects and they're looking for better housing, they're looking for better police protection, they're looking for all of those things that poverty doesn't always allow you to have, and you're also talking to very wealthy people who are investing investing millions of dollars in the city. You have to, as the mayor, find a way to make those conversations meet. You have to make each one understand that we both have to be involved in this, or the city can't survive. So he did a lot of that, trying to figure out, how do I translate wanting to take the resources that this town has to offer and spread them among people who so desperately need and want to be a part of that dream of Atlanta. Because Atlanta is a place that people think of as a dream. You know, I'm going to go there. I mean, even now with music, you know, there's so much music here, and people want to go here because this is where the music is. You know, I want to go here because this is where the people are doing what I do. And I think a lot of that comes from that same spirit. There's something in Atlanta, you know, where there's something moving. And that's why it's called Something Moving, but it's also a meditation on Maynard. That's the full name of the piece.
Right.
Because it's not a biography. He doesn't appear as a character. The characters talk about him, but there is no actor who is pretending to be Maynard Jackson. I figured that'll take me another 50 years to have nerve enough to do that. But this is more about what it felt like to be here at that moment. For those of us who were there, so that people who weren't there will be able to remember those great feelings when a democracy actually does what you want it to do. It allows you to participate and to elect somebody that you trust, even when you don't always agree with them. It allows you to be a part of that mission that you all are on together.
Up next, Ray talks to Something Moving director David Cote.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill, bring good home.
So David Cote, congratulations. You are the director for this amazing show. And this is your directorial debut here at the Alliance Theater, right?
Right.
Yeah, so how excited are you? Because this is big.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. You know, I've been looking forward to this production, and to work with Pearl is like, you know, just a fabulous opportunity for yourself. And just as an artist, you know, you always strive to work with somebody who's been a pillar in the community. So, you know, Pearl is great, and this production here at the Alliance is going to be wonderful.
Absolutely. And this is like your fourth performance in a sense, or on your fourth production, if I'll say, that you've worked on with her.
Yeah, I mean, I've been assistant director for a few productions of Pearl's. Also, I've worked on productions on a secondary level. Okay. And, you know, Pearl's work is just, you know, it resonates with everybody. So it's a great opportunity for young people to experience it, and, you know, and old people alike.
Yeah. Now, what made you say yes to this particular project?
It's Pearl, it's Alliance, it's Maynard Jackson. It's everything that you kind of want to do as a director, you know. In my career, you know, I strive to do plays that educate, enlighten, and ultimately celebrate the wonder and fragility of our human experience. Right. So this does all of that for me.
And, you know, you're a product of Freddie Hendricks Youth Ensemble. You went to Tri-Cities, the famous Tri-Cities. You taught at Tri-Cities. You grew up here, as I say, in these Atlanta streets, no T, Atlanta, right? What was it like seeing Maynard Jackson as a young kid?
Well, you know, when as young as I was, I mean, he kind of came when I was really young, so I wasn't really into politics and looking at Atlanta, but I could see the results of having Maynard Jackson as a mayor here as I grew up, and seeing the economic strives of Atlanta, and how we have grown as a community and as a city. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of that is attributed to Maynard Jackson, and you could see those results. And growing up here is, you know, it's really special, because you go other places and you don't see people thriving like Atlanta was, right, or Atlanta is at the moment. So, you know, it's like really important to really recognize that, and recognize how did that start, and how did that keep building, and how we keep building upon that.
Absolutely. Amazing cast. Got a chance to see some of the actors that are going to be hitting the stage. Tony Vaughn, legend, right?
Right.
Margot Moore, legend. Terry Burrell, legend. What has it been like working with these individuals? Because they always bring it every time they hit the stage.
Well, you know, when we was putting the cast together, we kind of like wanted to put together people who really knew Atlanta, who really was here, who really were really pillars as far as actors in Atlanta. And a lot of them, either we worked with them before, or we wanted to work with them, but we just knew that they would bring something to this production that would be invaluable. So, I think we have a stellar cast, wonderful people as well, so we really wanted to make sure that the citizens in this cast were really good citizens and really good actors that wanted to bring this story to life.
Absolutely. What do you want audiences to take away from this production?
There's so many things. I think this production teaches us how to look introspectively at ourselves and how do we meet the moment in our lives, how do we stand for justice, how do we just take the opportunity to be here, to be present, to meet the moment. I think Maynard Jackson met the moment. He wasn't like an activist, but he said, listen, something needs to be done. I'm here. I'm going to stand on this. I'm going to make something move. And something moving is a meditation on that. It's a meditation on social justice and power and the things that we need to be as human beings, to stand up for the things that are right.
All right, David Cote, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When we return, Ray will conclude his conversation with Something Moving playwright Pearl Cleage.
Nobody likes an awkward silence, but you can actually use it for something good.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
So, Ms. Cleage, you have been a playwright in residence here at the Alliance Theater. Is it 13 years now?
14, actually.
14, okay. What has that experience been like? Because when you got here, Susan Booth was the artistic director, and now there are two co-artistic directors, one of which is an African-American woman. I don't think that this company has had an African-American woman as a co-director. So what has this journey been like these 14 years?
Oh, it's been great. It's really been great. Susan was a wonderful artistic director and a great colleague. And we had several conversations very early on, which is why she was interested in inviting me to be in residence here, about race. She grew up in Chicago, came here from Chicago, and really wanted to understand Atlanta. And I said, you can't understand Atlanta unless you understand something about race. So we kind of took an oath with each other because they had commissioned a play from me for the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, which is a theater in Montgomery.
Okay.
And that became the Nakarima Society.
Oh, which I totally love.
And so that was the first time, thank you.
Yeah.
That was the first time Susan and I had worked together. And so we, since they had commissioned it in Montgomery, we had to go to Montgomery first before it came back here. Okay. So we lived in the same apartment building together for like a month of rehearsals in Montgomery. And we talked about everything. We talked about everything in the play. We talked about race. We talked about class. We talked about feminism. But we had that moment of what I always say to people is, I really want us to be able to work together and to be friends. But you have to promise me that you will always tell me the truth, and I will promise you that I will always tell you the truth, and we will not be angry, even if that truth is something we hadn't expected, hadn't heard, and all of that. And I also said to Susan, because Susan is white and I'm a black woman, right. And I said to Susan, and no matter what I say, you don't get to cry. Because that's something that often happens in discussions between white women and black women. At a moment when it's really uncomfortable, the white women will cry. And then it takes all of the energy away from the issue that's being discussed, and you have to stop and comfort the woman. So I told Susan, this is the one rule I have, you can never cry. And so she said, oh my goodness, okay. And then she started calling me. She would say, I was watching TV and I saw Paula Deen, and when they got her on that stuff, she was saying wrong. She started crying. Then she would call me, somebody else was crying. I said,
So she recognized what you were saying.
She understood.
Yeah.
And once we talked about it, she saw it. So she would come back and say, yes, I understood. So we had a great time, worked through a whole lot of stuff where it helped her understand the city more and helped her understand what needed to happen to transform this place, this theater, into something wonderful. I'm so pleased that Chris Moses and Tinashe are now the co-artistic directors, because they're so wonderful. I mean, they're great artists, they're great friends of mine, and I know that they have in them the energy and the vision to make this place be the kind of theater that is actually Atlanta's theater in a very real way. So I'm very happy to be here. I know that I am an agitator. I am a good person for saying, wait a minute, how about that? Wait a minute, what about that? What about that? And I'm committed to that because somebody on the inside has to do that as well as people on the outside. You know, you don't have to wait for people to pick at you to say, oh my God, I didn't know anything was wrong. You have to have people who work on your staff to say, that's not good. That's a bad decision. We need to rethink that one. Let's talk about how we arrived at that. Let's talk about how we choose our staff. Let's talk about who presents on that stage and what they present. So I still see that as part of my role here. I've done a lot of work with young people here. I worked with the Collision Project for 14 years. That's really an important part of the work that I've done here with the Pulaski Collision Project. But it's just a moment when artistic institutions in our country and in our city have got to step up. You know, the arts are a place where people can come together, but the artists have to understand that they're inviting everybody in and not just invite this one or that one, that we have to have a big enough tent to say we want everybody to come and see The Preacher's Wife. We want everybody to come and see Something Moving. We want everybody to come and see English. We want everybody to come because if we do it right, people who come here will turn to the person sitting next to them, who they may never have seen before, and say, what did you think about that? You know, didn't you love that? Didn't that make you mad? Whatever it is, but it helps the conversation moving forward as a community. And I think that's a big part of what I really love about being here at the Alliance is that I can be a part of moving that conversation here and rippling that conversation out into the city.
And what is I'm going to put you on the spot, I guess, your fondest memory of Maynard? Or is there a story that whenever his name pops up?
When he announced my daughter's birth on the radio. He was on the radio doing something, and I can't remember what the station was, but it was a black radio station. And he said, and we want to welcome the newest citizen of Atlanta, Degnan Lomax, who was born this morning at Holy Family Hospital and all that. And so the nurses all ran to my room, and I said, what y'all doing listening to the radio? You're supposed to be at work. And then he came to see me and just was bigger than life always, and just a really, really wonderful personal moment. Professionally, I think the moment that stays with me is we did something that we talk about actually in the play called People's Day, when the mayor's office was open for anybody who wanted to come and talk to the mayor just for that one day. And that was actually my idea. I'm very proud of that idea, to say, let people in. They want to see you. You're the first black mayor of Atlanta. They want to see you. And an old woman came. She's probably about my age now, but at that time I was about 25. So she came and she wanted to, she was there at People's Day. We took her in. And the mayor came and sat across from her. She was sitting on a couch. He sat in a little chair, and he said, and what can I do for you? And she said, you can't do a thing for me. And he said, okay, well, why are you here? And she said, I just want to see what it looks like to see a black man sitting in the mayor's chair. And he got up, walked around behind that desk, fixed his little jacket, and sat there and said, how do I look? And she said, you look wonderful. Oh, wow. And I almost started crying. I'm at work, so I'm not supposed to burst into tears, but it was that moment when what she wanted was to actually see proof that we were making progress and that somebody she trusted to be our leader was sitting in that chair. And he sat in that chair beneath the city seal and said, how do I look? And it was like, you know, she was like, you look wonderful. Wow. And that was a moment I'll never forget.
Well, Ms. Clegg, thank you so very much for taking the time out to talk to me about Something Moving, a meditation on Maynard. This will be taking place here at the Alliance Theater's Hurt Stage, August the 2nd through the 11th, and I believe that you can get tickets at alliancetheater.org, right?
Yep, right now.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That wasn't so bad, right?
That was great. That was great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Join us next week for the conclusion to our Upfront special on Pearl Clegg's Something Moving. Ray Cornelius talks exclusively to former First Lady of Atlanta, Mrs. Valerie Jackson, about Maynard Jackson, the husband, the mayor, and the lover of the arts.